Hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to have Samra today with me. Samra is a recurrent guest in this podcast because she and I have such amazing conversations. And we have also La Chiquis as a guest in here, my cat. Welcome, Sandra. It's so nice to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me again on your podcast. I'm so happy to have an opportunity to talk to you about things that interest both of us. So I think it's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we love to talk about social justice, privilege, and even when we are both sexuality coaches, our kind of work is focused so much on uh, awakening the
Yeah.
power in each one of us. And it's so funny because when we think of power in the terminology of the coaching industry, it's like the coaching industry forgets the fact that empowerment has so much to do with social justice. Like we
Yeah.
cannot just try to empower somebody and then forget the fact that our environment affects the way in which we move.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, yes, absolutely. And that's why when you mentioned that you kind of stumbled on the issue of privilege and how it creeps up in all coaching work, in either in marketing or and stuff like that, I totally totally recognize that. And it's exactly as you say, it's kind of differentiating what's true transformation and true change individual, but at the same time acknowledging, as you say, that you live in a particular context, in a particular environment that unfortunately isn't equal for everyone. It doesn't give the same message to everyone. Not everyone feels equal within that, and I think it's an important thing to think about within the work that we do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, totally. I think uh, we both have, if this is your first time listening to this podcast, we both have this very specific points of view because of our background. I am Mexican, and being a Latina, also with Lebanese roots, I
Mm-hmm.
kind of never belonged anywhere. I never belonged really to the Mexican environment because people would stare at me like, you look different, your face looks different, because I
Mm-hmm.
have these dark circles under my eyes that I love and I couldn't change, but that they could kind of signal me every time I was in a space. Then I went to schools of mostly white people, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
belong there either. They mocked me. I was pretty bullied in school because of my physicality. Yeah, it was just weird for them, and not to. It's like, thank God for the Kardashians, because they kind of made it more normal for people to be like kind of like this mix with some big hips and big asses,
Yeah.
and which is my kind of body. But before them, in the 90s, I was like treated literally like a freak show because I had
Yeah.
a body that didn't fit with the kind of bodies that the students in my high school had.
Yeah.
I so Mexico is a place where you have both extremes: very white people, the white
Mm-hmm.
Chicans that we call them now, and you have brown people, which is what
Mm-hmm.
most people around the world knows us for. But then there are some of us that don't really fit. There are some Asian Mexicans, there are some Afro Mexicans, there are some Lebanese Mexicans, and we don't really fit. And that creates a whole different story of trying to find our place in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
then I would love for you to tell us, to tell the people in here, what is it that is your background?
Yeah. Yeah. So I live in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm from Bosnia and Herzegovina, which for people who don't know geography very well, and it's a small country. It's a small country in Southeast Europe. And I think from my perspective, even though, I'm obviously very westernized, I grew up in America as a child. I have a Western education. I'm a white European. But in many ways, I feel a little bit like you, that I don't really belong to quote unquote Western world. I don't consider myself a Westerner per se. Even though, as I say, I've been educated, I'm a white European. I live in Europe. So there is this aspect of kind of Western culture, American culture, that even though I grew up with it and exposed to it, that I don't quite always feel comfortable in, so to speak, or I do feel a bit of an outsider in that context as well. But otherwise, as you, I'm also a sex coach, a women's empowerment and men's coach. But then you and I kind of um, follow the same people and gravitate around the same things and kind of notice certain trends when it comes to these issues. Yeah.
Totally, totally, and that's what we wanted to talk about. This wheel of
Yeah.
privilege. I recently posted an amazing work by Sylvia Duckworth. I think it's her
Mm,
name. I will check it out and add it in the comments about the wheel of privilege, and that resonated so deeply with me because I
mm,
realized that one of the hardest aspects of even existing, but then even more trying to thrive in this or any space is not acknowledging our privilege and how mobile it is, how
mm,
where we are being um, in a disadvantage in regard to others, we are
mm,
also holding privilege over others,
mm,
and that it's not a black or white thing, that it's a space that has mobility, and that in this mobility we find that we are always in a space of supporting somebody else, but also need support from others because
mm,
there is a constant disadvantage that we're dealing
mm.
with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we touched upon this on our last podcast interview. That it was totally spontaneous. That we ended up talking about something completely different. And I read somewhere, I can't remember where I read it, but I like this kind of idea of privilege as the absence of obstacles. And from that perspective, as you said, all of us have certain degrees of privilege. Whether, for instance, my privilege could be that I'm able-bodied, that I'm heterosexual, that I'm cisgendered, that I'm white, that I'm fluent in English. So all of these are positions of privilege
Yeah.
that I have because I have certain absence of obstacles that someone else might not have. And I know privilege is like a very trendy word currently because it's kind of used a lot and there's a lot of emotional charge over it. But I think there is, and it's not about guilt tripping and it's not about being ashamed of who you are. But I think there needs to be, at least I feel in the sphere that you and I work in, which is around deep, personal development. I think there needs to be, what I would invite other coaches is to have this more deeper sensitivity of where their privileges exist and how it interrelates to their marketing, to the kind of transmission and transformational work that they're showing. For instance, for me in particularly, all of us have these kind of, transformation stories. We were either shut down sexually and then we worked on ourselves, and or we had really bad relationships and then we worked on it and then we had this transformation, and this is the transmission that we have with our clients, which I think is a beautiful thing. It's a very powerful tool to share our personal stories and personal challenges that we have, because most of us, I think all of us, became coaches and decided to do this work because we had certain issues of our own that we wanted to address. But I think it's also important when talking about that is to also, if not openly mention, but be conscious of where the elements of privilege also helped in that transformational, process. So for instance, if we take the examples of relationships, obviously if you're in a relationship in which you don't have too much economic kind of tension, so both of you are working, or you have relatively good jobs, or you don't have children, for instance, so you don't have these stress factors within the relationship. Of course, the dynamic and the quote unquote success of that relationship will be a bit different if you didn't have these, or if you did have all of these factors. Or for instance, if someone's talking about how they started their own business, and how they started from zero to a certain amount of money after a certain period of time. I think that's, of course, there's a lot of personal work that goes into that, but at the same time, it's also, it's not the same if someone has someone that helps them financially in the course of developing their business as someone who has to support other people or is, worrying about children or taking care of someone else and also starting their business. So it's not the same point. So I think that, as me who consumes that, I sometimes feel a little, you get a sense of inadequacy, that if you're not really achieving what you're seeing, that there's something inherently wrong with you. And yes, there is this kind of transformation that you have to go do, this work that you have to go to, but there's also some unrecognized privilege on the other side that actually contributed for this person to have the status or whatever it is that they have at that time. It always has to, at least a little bit. I mean, not, a lot of it is hard work. There's no doubt about it, but there is some privilege. As I say, there has to be some absence of obstacles that enabled you to get there.
I love that you speak about guilt. I think that is such an important point because,
Yeah. Yes.
and the emotional charge of privilege. I think that
Yeah.
um, actually the thing that triggered me to reach out to you and to invite you to have this conversation was that I heard a call. I heard a, a I don't know how to call it. It was a call in a topic, a discussion, and the person in the call was speaking about not using the word privilege
Mm,
because that was harmful. And I was like, wait,
mm,
wait, wait. We need to use privilege. We just need to understand what it is. So as
mm,
not,
mm,
and that it's not a guilt trip, but we cannot stop using it. We need to
mm,
actually become aware of it for the mental health of everybody involved, not
mm,
to
mm,
damage our mental health but to support it. And in
mm,
that what I mean is understanding that we all have different starting points makes
mm,
such a difference in how we
mm,
feel about ourselves and our
mm,
achievements.
mm,
Understanding that we are not starting the race from the from the same places, that some
mm,
people are starting the race, and it's not even a race. Well, the marathon, the whatever path or
mm,
we are choosing, because it's not a competition, but we are starting from different points, from
mm,
different experiences that have built us. We have overcome different situations, and all that it means is that we have different achievements to celebrate. For a person that
mm,
has I don't know, in my case, just my studies, just the thing of being able to study with Leila Martin was a
mm,
huge achievement for me, because it meant
mm,
paying a quantity of money that I would have never paid, like I think since college. Uh,
mm,
and I paid that in college in a longer period of time. So
mm, mm,
it meant an investment that I was not familiar with, when
mm,
other people from the same community had already paid coaching packages for that amount of money before, that they were
mm,
familiar with that kind of investment. So the starting point is different, and
mm,
and the acknowledgement of that gives you that sense of tranquility, like, okay, it's not because that is the thing with marginalized identities. We are also raised to think that our issues are our creation. Like,
mm,
oh, you are lazy. Latina women are and Black women are lazy, and they are not hardworking, and they are not ambitious, and these idiotic ideas that white supremacy has put on our or on the mind of uh, white people, specifically
mm,
about the identities of those of us that are not white,
mm,
and that we have to struggle with when we are working, right? I remember to mention an example, because you might think, oh my god, I have never thought about that when I see a black or a brown woman, but I
mm,
have heard that literally, and specifically, there was a point in which I was thinking about migrating to Canada before I started studying. I used to work 20 hours a day for my translation work, sometimes when there was a lot of work. It was a 20-hour journey daily,
mm, mm,
uh, to get very small payments, because it was tremendously underpaid. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there must be a better way. I would try migrating to, I don't know, Canada. Canada seems like a good option, and I know somebody there. So I contacted this girl and I said, hey, how was it for you to migrate to Canada?
mm, mm,
And she said, no, you have to work. to get things done
Mm.
here. And I was like,
Mm.
dude, of course, I know. That's why I'm
Mhm.
contacting you.
Mhm.
I work
Mhm.
my ass real hard. But she was like, no, 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 nothing is given and it's not a gift. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? But then again, that is the very same ideology that has been promoted with migration all over the world. Like,
Mm.
oh, people, it's coming for the freebies. When immigrants work their asses real hard to get anything done, it's like, oh, they are coming for the freebies. They are coming to be sustained by the government. So this idea of Latina identities or Black identities working very little, wanting the freebies from the government, has been so harmful, and it's something that is working against us when we're trying to get somewhere. So
Yeah.
for me, that is the importance of acknowledging privilege.
Yeah.
It's okay, I am marginalized in this stage, in this part, uh, even when I have the privilege of speaking this language with English, which is not the case of many
Mm.
of my co-nationals, like they don't.
Mm.
Uh, but we have to struggle with the privilege of not being born in a country
Mm.
where people is paid a more just amount of money for their hard work. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I come from the same country, because, for you would have, I don't know, someone who of my professional status, if I was living in the West, I would probably be earning 2 to 3 times more here. So it has nothing to do with my level of education. It has nothing to do with the amount of work that I put in. It's the fact that I live in a country that has, a small GDP per capita, that has a lot of other political issues that causes, salaries to be low, and all these things. And as you say, the only way, so there's only so much mind work that I can do within that context.
mhm,
And the objective factors I can only change if I leave this country. That's my only alternative. I cannot change the economic situation in my country to make salaries better. Now, I can develop a coaching business where I can supplement my income and I can start earning. But still, even that trip, at least for me, I find that it's a bit more difficult to do that. And it's, as you say, when you look at our space, and again, it's not about guilt tripping, and it's not about it's the way that marketing works. People want to buy what they see as being successful. So if they see very white thin women, in our case, that are saying how wonderful relationships they have, or sex, or so forth and so on, people see that and say, yes, I want that, click, and I have that, even though it's more than that. And obviously people that aren't thin, white, Western, and that don't necessarily have a different path by which they can achieve that. And I think it's just a recognition that, again, as I say, just noticing where the privilege is, and just being mindful of it. And both you and I follow Kelly Deals, who has this amazing kind of programs where she says that a lot of the kind of very classic marketing messages go against people that are from disadvantaged or marginalized identities,
mhm,
because it makes them feel inadequate. It makes them feel as if something's wrong with them, and that they don't have that level of success, when in fact they have much more greater objective obstacles than people that aren't within these identities, that aren't recognized within kind of, when you market affluence, or when you market, particularly economic, uh, benefits that you have, that again are great. I think people deserve it. If you've worked hard, I'm happy for you. But I think it's also acknowledging how that affects the quality of your life. The
mhm,
quality of your life isn't just your work on your belief system, on your mindset, on setting yourself goals and targets, and working on your relationship, working on yourself. But it's also these other factors, of which sometimes you don't really have an influence, of where you live, or what the color of your skin is, or the type of body that you have, or the age that you are, or whether or not you have an English with an accent, or not. So I think these are very important, um, just things that I would just urge coaches to be a bit more mindful of. That's all. And I'm mindful of my own self. I always double check anytime when I'm writing something, to make sure that it's that it's not speaking from a place of that it's not speaking from a place of privilege. Basically, I don't know how else to explain it. So it's not coming from a place of achievements that don't take into consideration this absence of obstacles that brought that achievement.
Yeah. So I love that you mentioned that part because that has been for me the biggest challenge. The idea that you have to pretend to be super successful, and we see influencers doing that in Instagram. I
Mm,
just learned that some people
mm,
rent houses in Airbnb with a group to
yeah,
super
yeah,
expensive houses in a group, and then they take pictures to get to post like the high life, like I
mm,
am super wealthy, look where I am
yeah,
staying, and they take pictures from amazing locations to get rich husbands or to get
yeah,
more following. So
yeah,
we are doing that also in the coaching industry.
yeah, yeah.
So for influencers to do that, I kind of get it because they are not really offering. I'm sorry if you're an influencer listening to this, and I hope that's not your case. But so many influencers are offering nothing more than mirrors, right? Like just look at this, I am amazing. Woo! But there is emptiness behind that.
Mm,
Um, Please, if you're an influencer and you're listening to this, you have the chance to offer depth. Try to do that also because that is so important to use our platforms for something greater than ourselves. That
mm,
is important. But the thing is, the idea of showing off a way of living that can uh, trick trick people into thinking that they are super wealthy because that's the way in
mm,
which they are going to fit in. The problem is that coaches do that too. Not
mm,
not in the same way. Not
mm,
they don't go and rent in a group a super expensive location, but they show off about huge amounts of money, and
mm,
that's really one of the things that angers me the most when I read a coach posting. I got $50,000 in, or whatever amount you want to say, in from one sale or from two sales, and I can I can avoid thinking, okay, but what's the change you're giving this person? Because
mm,
it's not about the amount you're charging them. It's
mm,
about the value you are giving this person. Are you really giving these people the transformation? And then the answer is immediately like, yeah, of course I am a great coach because I am charging this much. So it's
yeah,
like they identify the capacity of the results they are offering with how much they are charging. So if they
yeah,
are charging uh, 10 times more the next time because also the prices escalate in a ridiculous way. If they are
mm,
charging 10 times more the next time, it's understood that they are the best ones, that they are super
mm,
efficient, that they are just on top on the industry. And I really wonder, dude, are you are
mm,
you really
mm,
offering that depth? Are you
mm,
really offering those deep changes? Because I really think, and that is something I am deeply passionate about in my own practice, that we should be focused on the results, that we should be
yeah,
focused on, and the results is not in my bank account. That's not
yeah,
a result. That
yeah,
that is that is something that should be qualified in a whole different way because there is privilege involved.
yeah,
I think the
yeah,
results is the transformation that you are offering. Is it really profound and deep? Is people really feeling held, honored, seen, uh, or are they just a walking wallet for you?
mm,
Are
mm,
they
mm,
just a super high contract? Or
mm,
are they people that you honor and respect and that you fall in love with every time you work with them? That you say, oh my God, my client is doing such a hard work. She's developing so much with
mm,
our work together. She's committed. For me, that is what real success looks like. So while
yeah,
I what I feel angry in general about is the dissonance, because I
Mm,
don't hear the people that are, I mean, not everybody, of course. I know that this is not applying for everybody, and I am not
mm,
trying to insult everybody in the coaching industry, but I am talking about like this general energy of speaking about the money, but not
mm,
really being committed to the people. And I think that it
mm,
should be first the people, and then the money, then later,
mm,
much later. Like, you don't really need to brag about the many thousands that you're making. That is,
mm,
that should be your own journey with money, but
mm.
you should be more focused on the results and the people, because that is what it's going to transcend.
Yeah, 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 totally. And as we were speaking about, I think it's also necessary to try not to. And I don't say, there. I'm sure there are coaches who work from a place of integrity, but still, just to kind of be mindful that you're not really that people aren't making any sales choice from a place of vulnerability or insecurity or a sense of inadequacy, that they're signing up to a program because they feel triggered that they're really not good enough, and that this program is going to fill the void of whatever it is that they're not good enough in. To actually, as you say, market not the pain points, which is another thing that I always had problem with the kind of traditional marketing system. But as you say, the values, the transformation, the container. So what it is in terms of quality that you're offering to your clients, rather in terms of, you're broken and I have the solution to your brokenness. Now, how you define broken, there's a lot of privilege in that, because there's a lot of, because what makes you less broken is, yes, your transformational work, but it also has the fact that you had absence of certain obstacles that enabled you to come to this place in your life where you're able to kind of offer this, or that you're marketing, basically, because oftentimes that's what coaches do. They market their lives. Oh, look how my achievement is in my relationships, in my sex life, in my business, in my personal life. You can have this if you sign up to my program. And I think
Mhm.
in essence, that's not a bad thing, but it has to be done very, I believe, very, very, very cautiously. And you have to be very, and I would appreciate being transparent about your privileges, your absence of obstacles. Say, yeah, I made a successful business, but to be quite honest, my parents gave me a loan for the first 2 years of my business, and I was able to live off of that, and I'm grateful for that. Or I had a partner in my life who helped me set up my business, and we worked together as a business partner, and that also helped me a lot to do it. I didn't have any debt while I started my business, or I had a lot of savings, and that enabled me to start my business. Again, with as with relationships, or with sex, you know a lot of the practices that we do, it requires intimacy, it requires time. And yes, it is about us carving out the time, but in some circumstances you just can't. So it's not about setting very unrealistic standards that a lot of people can't obtain. And if they can't obtain it, that means that there's something inherently wrong with them. I think that's the key, just to be a bit more mindful and transparent of it. And another thing that I also don't really like, I don't like the way in which, I mean, people mention who inspires them as coaches, but rarely ever, if you open someone's webpage, will you see, I learned this from this person, I learned this from that person, I taught here
Mhm.
and here, which for me, I mean, if you go to my webpage, and there's a section down, the teachers that inspired me. So there I'll be populating everyone that have been helping me to kind of populate my way of thinking, my coaching practice, the methodologies that I use, because we build on each other. Because there's this kind of notion that kind of you're so unique that you don't really have to reference all the teachers from which you learn from, and then further developed your own methodologies based on your own experience or further research that you've done, which I think
I
just
love
adds
that.
another dose of credibility. Yeah, because a lot of, again, another element within the kind of coaching is this sense of expertise or authority, that you're
Mhm.
kind of this main authority, and that you need all this money because you're the main kind of person that should be done about this. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it needs to be just done carefully, and I think it just needs to be done with a bit more mindfulness. And as you said, this kind of consciousness around the social issues that we're facing. So like, I won't go into specific examples, but for instance, you can't talk about and you mentioned that, it's not always your fault that something's happening within a particular context. So for instance, you can't talk about a relationship and say that it's up to women to be more clear and communicate around things that they need in the relationship, which is true, but at the same time not acknowledging the fact that, for instance, emotional and domestic labor is something that women still fight with within the home. Women are still disproportionately burdened with domestic work, burdened with taking care of the children, burdened with the emotional work, and it's not about her ability to negotiate with her partner and have a good communication. It's the patriarchal system that makes this expectation that women need to take this burden.
Oh,
So it's not
yeah.
always about, so it's not just she has to work on herself. Her partner has to work on his perceptions of what male female roles are. And then there's this wider social context that, and in which domestic labor is a very real issue. I mean, in COVID, a lot of women have kind of went backwards in their careers because they were so burdened with the husband literally locks himself in the room on his Zoom meetings all day and doesn't come out, and it's left to the women to cook, to clean, to take care of the children, and do her own work. And research has shown across the board that women are just worn out, and it's because these disparities that we were able to hide a little bit became more obvious, and it's a real thing. So it's not in our heads. It's not because
Yeah,
we don't communicate with our partners very well. It's a very real thing. And I
totally.
think there needs to be at least a little bit of acknowledgement that that exists, that it's not just, as you say, it's not a mindset. It's not a mindset issue.
Thank you. I think that is so important. So to put it in perspective, we just went from the in the wheel of privilege.
Mm,
There are many areas. We spoke about the privilege of being born with money, which
mm,
is some of us are not. Some of us are born with money, and that is a privilege we need to acknowledge. And some people are really having a very hard time with it. So
mm,
that is one part, one area of the privilege. Another area of the privilege is, of course, being a woman.
mm,
That in many cultures means such a disadvantage because
mm,
the struggle for equality is not the same in every culture
mm,
and in every ethnicity and in every country. I was just watching yesterday a movie that really I adored. I really recommend it. It's called Moxie, and oh my gosh, it was amazing. It's a movie for teenagers. Because it is, a feminist movement in high school, which is such a mirror for the world. But there is this moment in which this girl from Asian roots uh, um, is not really into the movement in the same way than the Latina, Black, and white women are. So the girl, the star of the movie, the white girl, of course it's a white girl, right? But the star of the movie uh, says, but you're not interested. And the other girl says, of course I am. It's just that my struggle is different. I have to do, my parents sacrificed so much for me to be able to make it here. So I cannot just act the same way you do because I would be misrespecting them if I do. So I need to do things my way. And that was for me so
mm,
relevant because that awareness of
mm,
how each one of us fights our own uh, way into equality has to be recognized, and how
mm,
uh,
mm, mm,
and so I hear what you are saying about how in the coaching industry, another one of the issues is not just the let me show that I am an amazing coach because I am making a lot of money. So this other area is that we women also have to struggle with this other thing in coaching, that is this super polarization, where we are there
mm,
is this new fashion in our industry, specifically in the sex, love, and relationship coaching industry, in which people over polarize us, in which is taking us back
mm,
to the 50s. It's taking us back
mm,
to
mm,
that stage in which women are meant to be just receiving and just magnetic and just
mm,
attracting the male energy, and we are wanting the male energy to direct us. that is for me such an issue that really triggers my anger,
Mm,
because I was there. I really believed that shit for a
mm,
time in my life. And what happened was that I was deeply disempowered in my life because I was
mm,
believing that shit.
mm,
So that is a whole other issue that I really think we should discuss further. But it's so important to
yeah.
acknowledge that the women that are speaking about uh, how amazing their partners are, because they are so masculine and they can just rely in their feminine. They're being blessed with the privilege of having
Mm,
men with a very developed kind of masculinity, maybe from a developed country
mm,
that has already done the feminist work for a long time. So they are harvesting
mm,
the fruits of the hard work of many women before them. And they are enjoying the privilege of having a partner that is not violent, and that they
mm,
were not raised in a culture that is deeply manipulative and gaslighting women, which is the case of
mm,
many Latina women. I know that in my
mm,
culture, I if you told a woman you just need to set up your boundaries with your partner, I would say, I've been doing that for years and it's a never ending
mm,
story, because you have to struggle with a freaking story of machismo that is coming from generations before the men in my life. So it's not easy to just set your boundaries clearly and just speak to them and everything is going to be butterflies and rainbows. No, because we are still in the struggle to even be seen as women, not property. So that is
mm,
it's such a different stage if you consider how, and if you think of people that is even in countries where the struggle it's harder, in cultures where they are even some stages below when it comes to the fight for feminism, for equality.
mm,
The truth
mm,
is that the reality is very, very diverse.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you're talking about that, yeah, because I mean, for me, the moment someone says, as a woman, you should open yourself to be submissive to a man, I automatically get a very defensive response because in my family, women were forced to tolerate very abusive relationships because they had no power, no economic power, no ability to leave that relationship, and knew that if they did leave that relationship, they would either end up dead, poor, destitute, dependent on relatives to provide for them, and so on. So, as you
Mhm.
say, I think I understand the kind of energetic kind of story around that approach where it's around us women reclaiming our feminine energy, all of this, and that makes sense. But as you say, we unfortunately don't live in a world where we're still safe to be dependent on anyone. And as you say, if you've come to a point in your life where you can do that, great, that's amazing. But it's not just about, it's not a natural model for everyone, and there's a reason why that can happen. And there's a reason why, for instance, I would never put myself in a situation where I would financially depend on a man, even if that person was the most amazing, wonderful to me, because that's for me, it's a risk that that I mean being dependent on someone that I don't have agency over my life, that I don't have power over what would happen to me if this relationship fell apart, or if this man no longer provided for me. So for instance, for me, that's no source of empowerment. I do not lean into my feminine if I allow a man to take care of me. On the other hand, I don't need to, I don't want to be combative with my partner. I want this to be kind of like an equal, kind of equal relationship, and that the and my feminine energy can come into expression. But I think, yeah, as you say, when whoever, from the point of the view of kind of coaches, I just, as it can, just a kind of invitation, just to sit a little bit with your transmission and just understand the kind of wider context of what it means and contextualize it. Make it very clear. Yes, I have the, as I say, privilege of meeting a man who was very enlightened, who works a lot on himself. So I feel safe leaning into my feminine, being more submissive, being taken care of. But I acknowledge the fact that not many women can do that because they don't have that situation. But here are some things that you can do to kind of, within even that context, put in more feminine energy or whatever it is that you're mentioning. Or for
And
instance, another thing, within our industry that I sometimes know, and again, it's not judging anyone. I'm happy for that. But of course, if you're very attractive and if you wear very revealing clothing on your Instagram feed, and yes, that's sexually empowering. It is about celebrating the body. It is about that. But unfortunately, we don't live in a world in which people see it that way. So it's normal that that type of feeds, that type of images will get much more following, which will be much more people looking at it, because it's very close, unfortunately, to the kind of stereotypical pornographic images that sell and people see. And again, I'm not judged. I think it's beautiful. I think it's empowering. But even like famous celebrities like Beyonce, Rihanna, I think are amazing, sexy, powerful women. But unfortunately, they perpetuate the image that you have to be sexualized, that you have to wear revealing clothing to be a successful female musician, because you don't find other female musicians who aren't like that and who are equally as successful. That now, when we have the full array of everything, then that is equally empowering as this over here. But if that's the norm, if that's the only way you can get attention, then it's not empowering. Actually, it's feeding into this very negative patriarchal narrative of how a woman has to look and be to have the type of attention that is needed, which
yeah,
isn't, it doesn't come from an empowering space.
there are two things that I really want to reply to this, which is the first one, the the feminine, the idea that the feminine is one way or the other, right? Like, oh, the feminine flows and the feminine, you can rely on the feminine when you do this or the other. I think that we need to challenge that idea that the feminine is not necessarily what people is telling us it is, that the
Mm,
feminine is wilder, that the feminine is not described in this little box that
mm,
society has created for us, because they have designed such a box that makes the feminine to be attractive,
mm,
fuckable,
mm,
um, what's the word, like just when you give up, surrender, when you surrender,
mm,
uh, um, and and magnetizing, because we're always seducing things into
mm,
existence,
mm.
when in reality the feminine is so much more than that. Yes, those
Yeah,
are aspects of the feminine, but we are more complex than that. The
yeah.
feminine can be electric and wild and go for whatever she wants in life, and can be fierce and can be
Mm.
dominating and can be intense and can be and can
Dirty.
be dirty,
Yeah, messy. Yes.
messy and
Yeah.
big and scary, and
Mm,
you don't need to fit into any box to be feminine. I
mm,
was personally, and maybe that's the reason why I'm so passionate about this. I was brainwashed into that mindset for a long time.
mm,
And I therefore chose not to work, to allow my husband to be the provider, because I was going to be just nurturing my children. And I did an amazing job nurturing my children. That's something I
mm,
don't regret in that area, but that
mm,
led me to be super vulnerable for my husband to choose what to give me, what not to give me, how to treat me. That
mm,
was a very unpleasant experience.
mm,
That was
mm,
painful. So I would never ever tell any woman to just surrender and let the male guide the way, because I was
mm.
there. I let my
Yeah,
husband guide the way, and the truth is that I didn't feel empowered. I felt
yeah,
disempowered all the
yeah,
way, because
yeah.
my way of being a woman includes my leadership. I am a
Mm,
leader. I am a woman that likes to create, to invent, to move, to motivate. So just sitting in the back seat and then smiling for my husband and saying, whatever you want, honey, wasn't
yeah,
empowering for me. It
yeah.
was the total opposite. I
Mm,
lived it, and that took a lot of healing to
yeah.
process. And the other part is the bodies. I think that
Mm,
we need to embrace the beauty of different bodies, how attractive a
mm,
woman with a bigger, not so young body can be,
mm,
and
mm,
also the fact that different cultures have different um, levels of uh, modesty, and that is
mm.
something we need to deal with, to
Yeah,
embrace.
yeah.
And that there are women still. I am supporting a woman that is going through something very intense, because her culture is punishing her horribly for
Mm,
some pictures that are not as not as modest, that are
Mm,
sexy pictures, but really like she suffered terrible and the truth is that that is a reality for many
mm,
women in many cultures.
mm,
That so we need to understand that those women might want to thrive as coaches, as therapists, as models, as entrepreneurs, or whatever they choose, but they don't fit in the paradigm of young beautiful woman
mm,
that is empowered because she's submissive to men and because she shows up without clothes, which again it's beautiful if you can show up without
mm,
clothes, so that there's no
mm.
criticism
Yeah,
there. But
yeah,
the thing is not every woman can do it. Some
yeah,
women
yeah,
can suffer terribly just because a little part of their bodies is visible. So
yeah,
we
yeah,
need to embrace the fact that we have the privilege of being
yeah,
able to show up freely without being afraid of being punished by the people in our household or the people around us.
yeah,
Because this woman wasn't even punished by her family, she was punished by her co-workers. So imagine
yeah,
the level of fear that she was living with. And the truth is that that is a reality that many women have to deal with. That is privilege.
yeah,
That is a privilege that we have to acknowledge.
yeah, yeah. And also, and I mean, yeah, obviously as an individual, what when we create our content, we can't do it, we can't take into consideration all the people of the world. But I think it's also acknowledging that, we function within a particular social space. So for instance, one of the things that came to mind that, for instance, in my culture, divorced women are still scorned and looked down at. So anyone who talks about divorce, and they're literally treated and thought of as whores. Really, they are. I've had several friends tell me that they've had these very horrific experiences since being divorced, of being, kind of very directly being having sexual advances from people that they wouldn't expect ever. And it's because there's this culture that if you're a divorced woman, there's something morally loose about you. So obviously within that context, it's different than in the West, where divorce is considered normal, basically, or a lot of people, and not because marriages are more successful where I'm from. It's just that there's this, for a long time, there's been this very deep social stigma around divorces, and people would rather live in very unhappy marriages than they would divorce. So obviously within that context, obviously the whole story around divorce is different than it would be in a Western, culture. And the same thing about being a sex coach. I mean, maybe here, if I tell someone that I'm a sex coach, they might think that I'm a prostitute, a sex worker. Who knows? I have loose morals, that I'll sleep with everyone. That I'm just having orgies 24/7 and so forth and so on. Which is, because our industry is a bit specific. But then obviously, if you're somewhere else where it's more normalized, or where there's more mainstream kind of acceptance, obviously that's a different, you function within a different set. And I think, for instance, I always appreciate coaches who just acknowledge that, just say, look, I am a heterosexual cisgendered, and that's what I'm trying to do. For instance, for mine, whenever I'm speaking, I'm trying to say I'm speaking from the perspective of a cisgendered heterosexual woman addressing cisgendered heterosexual man. So automatically, that this is a transmission and message that relates to that group of people based on that lived experience, which I think is useful. And the same thing would be good for others to say, look, I grew up, or I work in, America, or within a particular context when these things are considered normal, and I'm speaking from this perspective because here it's considered normal to talk about divorce, or to have polyamorous relationships, or to have open relationships. And there's nothing wrong with. So I think it's just because the internet, everyone can access to it. I think it's nice to just contextualize where you're coming from, because
Totally.
otherwise, when you're listening into it, and if you don't really know, you have this sense that it's a universal truth,
Hmm.
that it's something that has to be applicable to everyone, and it isn't, and
Hmm.
it can't be. And I think it's just, as coaches, we have a responsibility to recognize our context and acknowledge that context and our lived experiences, and the specifics of our lived experiences, and the privileges of our lived experiences, and that from this comes our content, our transmission, and the messages that we want to convey to others.
Oh gosh, I love that so much. I remember when we were training, my teacher, our teacher, who I love so deeply, she said, Oh, when I tell people that I am a sexuality coach, I am the center of the party. Like everybody
Yeah,
starts asking questions, and I tell them, and she said, "You just need to do that to say you're a sex coach, and people it's going to ask you questions, and that's how you
yeah,
start getting clients." Well, I tried that, and I got the
yeah,
most uncomfortable reactions ever. Like there
yeah,
were crickets. Like, what do you do?
yeah.
I'm a sexuality coach. Click, 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 click. That was one way of answering, and the
Yeah,
other was whenever I left the room and people was alone with my husband, they would go, "You're so lucky, man."
yeah, yeah,
And I was like, "What the hell? This is not about
yeah,
my husband. This is about me.
yeah,
This
yeah,
is about empowering women. Our sexuality is not for men, right?" So
yeah, yeah,
that was the first thing. Like, wow, you are so lucky. You can have sex with a sexuality coach.
yeah,
So, and then the people that sometimes contact me from cultures that are not that westernized,
yeah,
they get that idea that I am a prostitute, and
yeah,
they are trying to get me to have sex with them. Like they send dick pics, and I know
yeah,
they send them everywhere, but there is this energy around the asks that
yeah,
they are sending me. They are asking me specifics. They are trying to get into having sex, and even for free. Like
yeah,
if it's like, dude, they are
yeah.
duh.
There are
And
other
that
ways in which you can do that. Exactly.
exactly. So uh, that's so relevant. The importance
Yeah,
of acknowledging our culture. That's why I'll say I am a Mexican woman. Like I know I cannot hide it, but
yeah,
I
yeah,
am.
yeah,
And my vision comes from a woman that has gone through these life experiences. Also,
yeah.
my age. My that I am not that young anymore. That I have lived a lot of stuff. That it's not just the
Mm,
things that I think because I have a lot of time thinking about what is wrong with the world, but the things that I have experienced and therefore
yeah,
I have had to process. And I think all of that is important, as you say, to just come with the clarity of
yeah,
what is our privilege. That is something I would really like to close with. Uh,
yeah.
how important it is to not take privilege as a guilt trip,
Mm,
but as a starting point where you know what is it that you are, and that there is people that is far better and there is people that is far worse, and
mm,
therefore how can you support those that are having more trouble than you, and not to suffer because those that have it easier are
mm.
having better in quotation results.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That would be kind of what I would like to end with is just, as I said, just an invitation to fellow coaches, just to acknowledge it, really, just to be transparent about it. And we're all born in different contexts. Every context is important. No one should feel guilty because they are from born in the US and they're thin and they're affluent and they're white and beautiful. None of these things are things to be ashamed of. They should be empowered and celebrated just like anyone else. I think it's just a recognition of, yeah, again, awareness and consciousness of where your privilege is, whether or not you're actually showing true transmission or you're showing your privilege, and just
Mhm.
having an acknowledgement that, and also being transparent about your context, saying, yes, I am a white woman who lives in an environment that's very liberal and people, this is normalized, and I'm speaking from that lived experience, from that context, or I'm a Mexican and I'm speaking from this context which is different, or I'm from here. And just to kind of understand that it's not universal. Our lived experience don't live in a bubble, and it's universal to everyone. It comes from a very specific cultural, individual context. And I think people should just be transparent about that context.
Totally. And well, one last thing is really an invitation for the coaches,
Yeah.
which is let's stop making it about how much money you can get,
Yeah.
and let's make it about how much you offer to people, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise we are going to turn the coaching industry into a pyramidal
Yeah.
kind of business, into a scam, and we don't want to do that. We don't want
Mm-hmm.
people to enter the coaching industry because that is a make you rich fast industry,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not. Because people is suffering because they cannot find their way into the top of the pyramid that you're offering with your hundreds of millions that you're making, or with the hundreds of thousands that you're making. uh, let's make it about the results that you're offering. And I know
Mm,
some business coaches have to talk about the money because that is the, you know, their promise, like come and work
mm,
with me because then you're going to make money. But you know, the thing that I love precisely about Kelly Deals is that
mm,
for me she's such an inspiring coach because she's not offering me to become rich, but
mm,
because she's offering me how to transmit in a healthy way, in a way
mm,
that feels aligned to my purpose, in a way that feels connected to my social justice ideals. And for me, that
mm.
is more valuable than the
Yeah,
offering of becoming rich in three
yeah,
months if I work with somebody.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Totally, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for joining this
Thank you for
conversation.
inviting me. So happy to always join your podcast. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. See you soon, guys. Please, before I forget, I always forget this, and this is important. Um, Samra, how can they reach out for you? Do you have an offer that you would like to people to know?
Yeah, so currently I offer one-on-one coaching packages. They can find out more information on my website, www.alchemycoaching.org, or they can follow me on Instagram, Alchemy Coaching by Samra. I'm still a business in development, so obviously not always the information is there, but please, if you reach out through me through Instagram, or sign up for my newsletter, I respond directly to people who email me, and I'd be more than happy to share more information about the work that I do and the coaching that I offer. Thank you.
Beautiful. And well, I am offering also one-on-one coaching, but I am also offering a program called Bulb Alchemy. I will be telling you more about it soon, but the thing with Bulb Alchemy is that this is a conglomerate of my work, my jaded work, my social justice work, my feminist work, and my self-transformation work. So I'm looking forward to tell you more about it soon.
It sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.